Nadia Huq, thank you so much for joining me and a very, very warm welcome to Thrive Solo. Now, before we get into this, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course. Thank you so much, Lucy. It's wonderful to be here.
You're
My
welcome.
name is Nadia Huq. I work in my day job, I work in technology in the government, which is very boring, so I won't talk about that. But my real passion is writing. So I've been writing for a few years now, often about kind of single stuff and not having kids and like there's like a strong feminist theme behind that. So yeah, that's what I do.
Now, thank you for the intro. Speaking of your writing, let's start by talking about the beautiful, beautiful article that you wrote that you put in our, because just so the listeners know, Nadia is in my Thrive Solo membership and she shared an amazing article that she wrote. You wrote it a while ago, didn't you?
I did, yes, yeah, last year.
So tell us what it's called and tell us what it's about because it truly, I mean, it kind of took my breath away. I mean, you saw the comments in the chat. I'll put a link in the show notes so that anyone can read it. It's definitely worth reading. But tell me about this article, why you wrote it and what it's about, where it comes from.
Of course, yeah. So it's called The Childless Woman Who Soared, and it's a kind of fictional piece that tells the story of a woman who expected to have children and doesn't. And she suddenly finds herself in this wilderness where she doesn't have a map because she doesn't know how the rest of her life is going to play out because we're just not given a blueprint for what life looks like without kids. And so it just kind of tells the story of how she moves through this period of her life. So she kind of gets up, she's in a lot of pain, she's in a lot of grief. She moves through the forest, she's hurting, she's cut by the branches. But in time, she kind of finds her rhythm and she starts to find joy again and she starts to dance and starts to sing. And kind of towards the end of the piece, she has this realization, she comes to this wisdom where she sees this kind of highway that is full of parents, married couples, and their kids. And she looks at them and she sees lots of love and lots of joy and lots of happiness. But she also sees a lot of sadness and she sees a lot of frustrated desires and regrets and anger sometimes. And she kind of has this realization that actually she hasn't missed out on this kind of joyful life experience because every life is full of joy and it's also full of hardship, no matter
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah.
And kind of at the end of the piece, this she sees this kind of young woman in the forest like looking at her, and the young woman walks out and says, I'm lost, and she's got tears in her eyes. Another woman who doesn't have children and wasn't expecting to be there, and she says, listen, sit down and let me show you where I've been. And it's that kind of talking to the wisdom of older women without kids, that they've been where we've been before, and the enormous kind of reassurance that they can give to us and that beautiful relationship that can happen between childless women.
Yeah. Honestly, anyone who's listening to this, please do go and read this article. It truly is beautiful. It gave me goosebumps. You're an incredible writer. There is no doubt about it. Now, I know that you dedicated this piece to Jodie Day, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jodie.
Yeah, because of course she is such a kind of beacon for childless women. Now, let me ask you, I mean, I'm assuming that this piece was very much based on your own experience or inspired by your own experience and your own journey. Is it true to say that it was?
It absolutely was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so my own story was I broke up with somebody a couple of years ago. I was 37 at the time. And I think it didn't hit me initially. I was in kind of denial, I think, for a few months after the breakup. But then I just realized like, okay, listen, the reality is the age that you are, it's possible you might not meet somebody in time to have a biological family. And it just honestly, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I think any woman who has been through that will understand that feeling. It is just so difficult. It was so painful and just so much shame as well. I think that's what I didn't really expect at
Right.
all. And I know you've spoken about this, but I felt like such a failure. Like I genuinely felt like I've ruined my life. Like that's everyone's going to be looking at me thinking this is so tragic. Look at this woman. She's completely ruined her life because she's ended up unmarried and with no children. And there was a time when I genuinely felt like I had no purpose to be here anymore,
Oh gosh.
which is just, I mean, it's so bleak, not in any sense. I mean, I wasn't in any way kind of like suicidal or anything like that, but I genuinely felt like, what do I do now? Like the
Mm,
world has no use for me because I don't have kids. And so I kind of wrote that piece really in the depths of this kind of despair because I desperately needed almost to give myself some hope. It was like I was
mm,
talking to myself. The kind of the older me I wanted to be, was
mm.
almost talking to the woman that I was in that place who like desperately needed to hear, you're going to get to the end of this, like you're going to get to a better place with this. So like hold on. So yeah, that was the inspiration basically behind the piece.
Gosh, it just makes me so sad to hear you and so many other women talk about this feeling of feeling like they failed and feeling this shame. Talk to me a little bit more about what it actually looked like in your life to feel this shame around potentially not having kids. How did that manifest for you?
I think really it manifested in this feeling, which I have never had before, of just really not knowing what to do with my life, not feeling proud of anything that I was doing. Like everything that I was doing just felt like it wasn't that important or exciting. I made myself small. Like I literally felt myself kind of become this incredibly small person. And I felt like everyone was looking at me all the time, thinking, oh my God, she's so tragic. Like, oh, how dreadful for her to have ended up in this place. Because you've kind of internalized those ideas yourself. And even if you're not thinking that, what's ironic is I would never have thought that about a woman without kids,
Mm,
right? But I really thought it about myself.
mm,
So it's, yeah, I think for about a year, I just honestly was just in grief. Like that's the only way
mm.
I would describe it.
Yeah,
Really, really bad grief. And yeah, like actually educating myself has been really important in that process of starting to look at why did I feel that way? And it wasn't all coming from me,
yeah.
right? It really wasn't coming from me. So yeah.
Tell me about how you went from where you were then when you were as you say, when you were completely consumed by grief and feeling awful. How did you go from there to where you are now? What did you do to help yourself and to kind of move through that?
I would say it's really two things, two core things.
Okay.
The first thing is what you're consuming. So it is, and you've spoken about this before, it's
Yeah.
that diet, right? It's literally the cultural diet that you're consuming. So I read Jodie Day's book, amazing book called Living the Life Unexpected. I started listening to your podcast and lots of other podcasts and started reading lots of different articles. So just almost like you don't believe it necessarily at the beginning, but it's like I need to keep on taking this on, right? I need to
Yeah.
trust in this process that this is slowly going to start to change my mindset. So I think that was the first thing. I think the second thing that was so important was meeting other women who are single and don't have kids
Yeah.
because I adore my friends. I absolutely adore them so much, but they are pretty much all married and they
Yeah.
pretty much all have kids. And what I felt for them, even though they were way too sensitive and compassionate to ever say anything like this to me, you can feel the pity and the worry
Mm,
because for them, they could never imagine being in your situation,
mm,
right? So, like, you can feel the kind of projected fear that's coming off them.
yeah.
And that's really hard because it's like you're in the ocean, right? And you're trying to swim and you're trying to get your head above water. And then every time you're around people who make you feel bad, it's like another thing that's kind of pulling you down. And so it's just so brutal, that period of trying to sort of keep your friends in your life,
Mm,
be with them, talk to them, but also know that you kind of need to get out of their orbit just for a little bit in
yeah.
order to be able to heal and to start to think differently about your
Yeah.
situation.
Totally. No, I love that you say those two things because I couldn't agree more. And particularly about the content that we're consuming. As you've said, I've talked about this before. I talk about it ad nauseam because I feel so strongly, and I know from my own experience that, and not just to do with being childless, but just in life in general, what we're allowing into our minds is hugely impacting the way that we feel, the way that we see the world. And life, in my opinion, it's all about perception. It's all about the lens through which we are looking. And I think people underestimate how, or I think sometimes we just don't even think about it. I didn't used to think about it. I didn't actually used to ask myself, what am I allowing into my brain that is making me feel this way or making me feel this way? And what is perhaps making me feel like shit as opposed to making me feel good? Which people are making me feel like shit as opposed to making me feel good? So thank you for giving those two core things because they are two of the key things, aren't they? And if you make a real effort to work on both of those things, meeting other childless women and changing what you're consuming to kind of follow people and listen to people's podcasts who talk about being single and not having kids in a positive way, that they are so hugely important. I want to go back to your earlier years. Can you just tell me, Nadia, were you always motivated by really wanting children? Was that always at the top of your list of what you wanted in your life? Because you know my story, and you know that for me it wasn't like that. And I don't know your story. So what is it?
No, sure. I mean, honestly, the truth is no. I think I'm one of these people who I never really thought about it, but what I wanted was the fairy tale. What
Yeah,
I wanted was the happy ending for sure. I didn't dream about having children at all. I didn't honestly even think about it. I love kids, but I never thought of, oh, I can't wait to be a mother and I can't wait to take my child to school. Yeah, I think I'm really one of those people, a really good example of somebody who just wanted the ending, right? The fairy tale ending, the kind of happily ever after, if you like. And I think that shows how powerful the messaging actually is
mm,
for somebody who actually wasn't that fussed about having children. I mean, I can see that there are beautiful things about it now, and I could before, but I can also see there are beautiful things about not having kids. And I love my life now, and I actually feel super grateful to be living it. So I think that shows how powerful the messaging is, the psychological messaging that we're all absorbing, that someone who actually, like, I feel I would have been fine if I'd had role models and it had been completely normalized in society for women to not have kids and to be single. I would have no problem with my life. I would love
yeah,
my life. But I would not have gone through what I went through last year. And
yeah.
I think that's what upsets me, right, about that messaging and why the work that you're doing is so important. Because
Thanks, love.
actually, of course, for some women, they really want to be mothers, and that
Mm.
grief is very much there. But for me, I think the grief was almost manufactured. It's manufactured by, these feelings that have been kind of stimulated in me by the stuff that I'd read and absorbed sort of over the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, no, totally. It makes sense. And it's so true because I think you're so right. And sometimes we do perhaps part of what we're feeling, part of the shame and part of the kind of, oh my God, I'm a failure. It's like it's not necessarily coming from actually within the essence of us. It's coming from though, like you say, the messaging. It is so incredibly powerful. Let me ask you, like these days, do you still have moments where you wish that you were going to have kids or where you feel any sadness? Is there kind of any residual pain and grief around not having kids? Or have you got to a place where you're totally cool with it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there's probably the odd moment, right? I think when I see sometimes my friends with their kids or my sister with my nieces, and I see the kind of loving interactions between them, I think, oh, that is really nice. And I am kind of aware that I'm not going to get to experience that. But I would say mostly I feel really okay about it, and I think it's because I recognize what I'm actually getting from my life by
Yeah,
not having children. I actually is an awful lot.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't really feel a lot of grief around it anymore. I have two wonderful nieces. I absolutely adore them. I just love hanging out with them, but I also love that I get time to write and I get time to do all these amazing things, which feels like such a privilege, and as a
yeah,
woman, didn't have that option,
yeah,
never had that option really in society. So
yeah.
I feel very grateful in some ways.
Let's talk now about your single life, because
Yes.
I'd love to find out where you are with that. So you broke up with someone who you'd been for a while, hadn't you, a couple of years ago? Tell us about, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit about your kind of relationship history and how you've ended up being single and where you are with that too.
Yeah, of course. So I was in a really long-term relationship from my kind of early 20s to my late 20s, and then broke up with him for like various reasons. And then I was kind of dating for a really long time. So I basically spent most of my 30s on the apps, essentially.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh. Oh my God, can we just digress for a sec? Can you just tell me a little bit about that? I really would love to hear your experience because you know I've never done it, so I'm always fascinated to hear people's experiences. And also whether you're on the apps again now or not, because I don't know that.
Yeah, no. So, okay, I'm definitely not on the apps now. I'm never going back on the apps again. Like,
Interesting, interesting.
I've definitely made that choice. I mean, truly, I think now I can look back on that time. And it's not like there were any horror stories for me. It was all fine. Everyone I met was really lovely. But I look at the apps now and I think, you know what? They don't work for me. They just did not work for me. And I think it's because I'm not just looking for a relationship. Like, I think some people really value having a relationship and finding someone kind of kind that they can spend their life with and have wonderful experiences with, and that's great. But I think for me, I've realized I'm looking for a very specific type of connection with
Yeah,
someone that I just really love and admire and respect enough that I actually seriously want to compromise a lot of my time in order to be with them. And I think I've realized that the apps are so bad at delivering that kind of connection because it's so random.
yeah,
You can't really say, like, oh, it's going to be this type of person and they're going to be this tall and they're going to look like this and have this job. The times that I've really fallen for someone, and it's been incredibly rare, but the times that it happened, I met them in person and it just hit me like a freight train, and you're like, and I just didn't expect it at all.
mm,
Um, so I think that was my realization, was actually using the apps when you are looking for love and something quite rare for you that is quite rare.
mm.
It was just, for me, such a waste of time, I think. And I don't regret it. Like, I had some nice experiences and I met some nice people. But now I look back and I think, God, I really wish I'd just enjoyed that time being single, right?
Mm.
It's like you're focusing so much on just going on dates all the time
Yeah,
that
because
you're
was it hard work being on the apps? I imagine it's like having a second job, essentially.
my God, it's such hard
Is
work.
it?
Yeah, it's like all the time. You're like swiping all the time, and then you've got to make conversation. It's like, okay, I've got to like say something to this person now, and then you're like messaging for 2 weeks, and then you've got to go on the date. And then if the date isn't terrible, you're like, well, I should probably go on another date because, I've got to give it time, right? That's what everybody says. So, like, the investment of time just into a single person that you match with and you're talking to is so high. And then you have the entire emotional arc through that, which is I've matched with someone. Oh, this is exciting. Okay. And you get your hopes up, and then you have the messages, and then you go on the date, and then it doesn't work out, and then you have the little crash. And it's like sugar, right? It's like you
Yeah,
have some sugar and you get this little high, and then you have the crash. And that cumulatively over like a 9-year period is like, this is not healthy psychologically. Like, I really felt like that was not healthy for me
yeah,
at all. Because most of the time in the past, when you meet someone, it would be in real life. And you'd kind of know that they liked you and you already liked them.
yeah,
So most of the time, it's like either this is going to work out and it's great, or maybe it won't. But you weren't having that constant series of disappointments.
yeah,
That's what the dating apps have delivered, I think, for a lot of people.
yeah,
And I think that's why so many people have just kind of gone off them and are going, I just don't want to do this anymore.
yeah.
Just,
And I think also it is incredibly rare, I think, that certainly for us, put it this way, and actually this is something I really want to, talk to you about because you said, let me just backtrack a bit. You said that you're looking for a specific type of relationship. You're not just looking for a relationship. And I really want to just explore this a bit more because you know me from the membership and, we've had many conversations on many live calls. And were you on the call actually the other day where we were talking about how some people are more willing to settle than others, and some of us just seem to have these, are we going to, we let's call them high standards. I mean, I don't necessarily think that's a particularly good term for it necessarily, but were you on that call? Do you remember that conversation? Yeah.
I can
And we
remember.
were like going, it's like this revelation that actually this is what's happening. Like we're just not willing to, or rather we were just saying how it seems that there are women out there who are more willing to kind of suck up certain things and sort of put up with certain things that we're perhaps not. And, we're all different, like no judgment. That's, completely fine. Everybody wants different things from relationships. But I just want to talk to you a little bit more about this because I think you and I are very, very similar in this respect. And I know other people in Thrive Solo are too. Maybe it's because we spend time with each other and it kind of reinforces the fact that actually it's better to be single than with the wrong person because actually being single isn't that bad. But talk to me more about this idea that you're not just looking for a relationship, because I'm not either. And as if and when I do get into another relationship, it's going to have to be with somebody who is a certain type of guy who has done the work on himself. Dare I say, that might sound really naff, but that's just how I feel. It needs to be a guy who is super self-aware, basically, among other things. What's your take on this? Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. For me, that emotional intelligence is just so important. And my kind of previous very serious relationship, one of the major problems in that relationship was that he wasn't very emotionally intelligent. So we'd have arguments and he'd just kind of shut down completely. And I also wasn't very emotionally intelligent, so I just get angry. And so the two of us together, it was just, we just weren't really working. I suppose my take on this is that I love my friends. I love writing. I love all of the things that I do in my life. And the reality is, being with a partner would take a lot of time.
Yeah,
And I don't want to really compromise my time for someone who I don't absolutely adore.
yeah,
And I think it's also a position of privilege because you have to be able to support yourself, right? Some people obviously don't get to make that choice. And of course, there are times when you're like, well, if I get sick, that will be hard and I'm going to have to navigate around that. But I still feel like I just don't want to make, just for the security of a relationship, I don't want to compromise on that feeling of, I just really, really love being with you.
mm,
And yeah, I think that's kind of my takeaway now is
mm,
it's just life is too good for me to compromise on anything less than someone
yeah.
who really makes me happy.
And is that very different to how you used to feel about guys and getting into a relationship, do you think?
Oh my God, yes. Like so different. I
Right.
mean, I would say 18, 19, 20. I was the girl who was like, get into a relationship, break up, straight into the next one. Right, like buses. Like get on the next bus, get on the next bus, get on the next bus. You're not even thinking about it. It's so normal for you to just constantly be looking for a relationship.
Yeah,
And when you're not in a relationship, to be trying to get into one.
yeah,
And that was the same for everyone around me. Like every single one of my female friends, exact same thing. No one was single
yeah,
really for any period of time. And if we were single, it was awful and we wanted to get out of it, you know, which is just so crazy. And one of the pieces I wrote a few months back was all about the kind of girlhood messaging that we get as young women, looking at kind of all of the kind of Disney films, which are obviously all about Prince Charming, but also a lot of the magazines that I read as a young woman. If you go back and look at some of the covers, the covers are all like 10 ways to find a boyfriend,
like
how to,
Cosmopolitan
oh my gosh,
was the
yeah.
worst. I used to read Cosmo, you're absolutely right. It was always exactly that: 10 ways to snare the man, or 10 ways to look sexy for your date, or whatever. It was always geared around relationships, wasn't it?
Really was. And you look back now and you think, I was 15 when I was reading this stuff, and really, when you think about it, it is just so unhealthy for young women to be reading this content, which is basically kind of encouraging them to find sexual relationships, because that's what it is, isn't it? It's not like talking, oh, how to find a great friend or how to find someone that you really like, or, it's how to find a boyfriend. And so, yeah, I think now I look back and I'm just such a different woman. And I think for my nieces and for all of the young women out there, that's why I really want this to change, and that's why I love the work that you're doing, is because I really want young women to realize that there is more to life than getting into a romantic relationship. And yeah, to not have that same experience that we had of, basically being in this fog of like, I must find a boyfriend, like, where are all the boys? You go to a school disco and you be sort of like scanning the room like some kind of crazy robot or whatever. It's like, and I just look back now and I think, God, and it's so crazy that I was that woman. I mean, I couldn't feel more different now, but.
So, what changed in you? Like, when did this switch happen, and what did you do to get from feeling like that to feeling so differently now in your life?
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly for me, it has been about really connecting into the things that I love and enjoy. So for years, throughout my 30s, I was dating, I was working, but that was kind of pretty much everything that I put my time into, and obviously seeing friends and family and stuff like that. I think in the last year, I've started to obviously write a lot, and I've joined a feminist group because, I'm a proud feminist and want to support women in any way that I can. And kind of going to like local political, like hideously dull political council meetings and stuff where I go there and I'm like, why aren't you investing more in this thing? But I think I just suddenly started to realize like there is a different woman here if I let her come out, and she's a woman who really cares about other people, who really cares about politics, who really wants to make a difference. And she's kind of cool. Like she's cool too, and I could be her. And I think learning about other women who are single and don't have kids has, for me, that they've just been these incredible role models. I mean, Jodie Day is one, and we spoke about Jodie
Yeah,
Day.
yeah,
Gloria Steinem is another, Oprah is another, but
yeah.
there are so Chelsea Handler, like there are
Yes,
so
love her.
many,
Love
and
her.
I love her so much, like so many absolutely fantastic women out there now.
So
And
true. I
I
really want to get Chelsea on the podcast. I really, really want to get Chelsea Handler on. Chelsea
think,
Handler, will you come on the podcast?
yes, if you're listening, Chelsea Handler, please come on the podcast.
Yes,
We love
please come.
you.
If she's listening. You never know. You never know.
You never know. She might be skiing down a mountain,
Yeah.
with her cat tied to her back, listening to you, Lucy. So,
Although in her case, it's dogs, isn't it? She has those
oh, is
huge,
it dog?
yeah.
Sorry.
No. But yeah, no, she is absolutely brilliant. I love her.
Um, yeah, I think how I got to the place that I'm at now was really about, yeah, sort of learning about other women, learning about women who don't have kids and are single and how they've kind of built their lives,
Mm,
and just really getting inspired by that. And I think it takes time to kind of let that filter through. But eventually you do start to go, these women are pretty badass. Like everything that they will have been through, and the fact that they are doing all of the things that they are doing is really quite extraordinary.
yeah,
And I think for me, I just started to feel like there is a life there for me that could be really lovely.
yeah,
So just wait and see what happens. I'm not close to anything. I'm not close to any relationship. I would be fine being single for the rest of my life. Like I would be
mm,
completely happy with that. Um, but yeah, I feel like I ditched the timeline, right?
yeah,
And I just started to go, whatever happens is all good.
yeah.
Uh, and that's been really, really important for me, really freeing, I think.
One thing that I want to ask you is, do you feel in any way that being single and not having kids has enabled you to kind of discover this other version of you? This woman that you're talking about, this woman who is passionate about politics and who loves her writing. Is there any part of you that thinks it's not in spite of that, but partly because of that. And if that's not the case, feel free to say, but I'm just interested to know.
I'm so glad you asked that question.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah. And I would say absolutely 100% for me. I think the reality is if I was married and had kids now, there's no way I'd be able to do everything that I'm doing. Like I see how difficult it is to raise young children. And of course, like people raise kids and continue to do amazing things and have jobs and their kids get older and they do all sorts of things. I'm not saying that mothers can't also have incredible lives. But I've definitely realized something that we don't really talk about is actually that raising children takes time, right? And we all have kind of limits on our time. And I have that gift of actually being able to use my time for these other things.
Mm,
And I think a big part of the reason that we feel that way is because of this having it all myth,
yeah.
which it's kind of like when if you don't have kids, people kind of look at that as an absence, right? They look at that as like, oh, you've just got your job and nothing else, because for a woman, it's just the career and the kids, right? That's it.
Yes, it's
You can't,
so true. I'm so glad you brought this up. Carry on.
yeah, and it's so crazy because it's like, no, 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 there's not an absence there. There's loads of other stuff there, right? That I'm doing because I don't have children. And it's almost like we can't really talk about it, or society just doesn't see it, and I think I really want people to start to recognize that. And I was listening to a fabulous podcast episode the other day with a woman she's a filmmaker, and she had her daughter. I think her daughter's now 11, and she was really, really honest about it. And she said, my creativity was just gone. It was shot, shot to shit, excuse my French, after I had my daughter. And she was
Right.
like, this is why I'm talking about this, is because I actually want other women to understand that this might happen to them. It's like, you are never the same person again, right?
Yeah.
It's never all about you. And being somebody who is creative or somebody who's really passionate about anything, whatever it is really difficult to balance that with having a child.
Yeah.
And I was just so pleased to hear her talk about that really honestly, because I think women need to hear it. It's not just the having it all thing. It really is a myth, and it's not fair to mothers and to women who don't have kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you sort of raised this point because I couldn't agree more. And I think that one thing you'll probably have heard me talk about before on the podcast and in Thrive Solo is, and it blows my mind. And this is what I talk about in the book, really. These underrated, unspoken, hidden benefits. And the fact that you said so rightly that it is as if, well, if you're not married and you don't have kids, then clearly your life is dull, empty, boring, whatever, because there's clearly this gaping hole. And it's like, no, it's the opposite of that. Because there is no husband and there are no kids, there is room and time to be creative and work on projects. And it's one of the best things for me that I have found about being single and not having kids is that it's allowed me to do so many things that there's no way I would have done if I'd got married and had kids. I know myself and I know life and I just know that I wouldn't have done them. And it pains me that these fabulous advantages that we have and these benefits that we have because of our situation in life are just hidden. I put a reel out on Instagram the other day, and again, it's something else I think I mentioned in the book is how what we do as a society and a culture is we hold up, we romanticize the wonderful things about being married and having kids. And we don't talk about the difficult bits. But when it comes to being single, we hold up all the crappy bits and we don't talk about the wonderful bits. It's so skewed, it's just so out of balance. And that's why I think we end up, partly why we end up feeling the shame and the, oh, even if we're doing amazing things with our lives, we still end up feeling like that. Even if there is a woman who is rocking her life and doing incredible things, you know that there will be people out there going, yeah, but she's single and she doesn't have kids. And it just completely undermines everything that the likes of you and I might be doing, you know? And so I'm really glad you brought this up because I think it's such an interesting topic and something that really needs to be talked about more. Now, speaking of creativity and the fact that because we don't have kids, let's talk more about your writing. I want to hear more about this. And also I want you to tell people at the end, how people can read your writing. So tell me more about this. What are you writing? You mentioned earlier that you wrote stuff about being single. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I write really about anything that intrigues me or that I just want to write about. But yeah, I've written some pieces about being single. So one of them was about why I will never compromise to be in a relationship. So it talks specifically to that. And it talks a little bit about actually the messaging that a lot of people get from society, which is always, I find a lot of it is framed around staying in the relationship, or you've got to compromise and everyone's got to compromise. And I got a lot of that from people around me, was this idea of like, you're too picky.
Oh,
Um, yeah. So
sorry.
no, not at all.
I
And
mean, it's just, let's talk more about that because, oh my God, how can you be too picky with the person you might potentially spend the rest of your life with, who you're going to be living with, who you're going to be living your entire life with? How is there such a thing as too picky? I don't get it. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
no, I don't get it either. I mean, like, love is spontaneously felt. You can't manufacture it. You can't just say, okay, you, because I happen to be at the right age now for this. I mean, it's so crazy. And I fully agree. Ultimately, we have to really respect when somebody says, no, they're not right for me, and I got this. People will kind of question that. It's like, oh, everyone's got to compromise, and it's like, I don't want to, I don't have to, and I'm not going to. So, yeah, to me, I just think it's crazy. And I think we just really need to respect the fact that everybody is different in this
Yeah.
space, and the choices that you're making, even if they worked for you and that's incredible, they're not going to work for everybody. And I
Yeah.
think just honestly looking at the comments to that piece, there were so many people that being like, thank you so much. You can just tell, like, and you with your podcast, right? You're hitting a nerve. People are like, yes, thank you. I'm not too picky. Like, it is normal to feel this way. It is normal
Yeah.
to not want to compromise
Yeah.
um, on the biggest decision you could possibly make in your life.
Yeah, exactly. I've written this down because I loved it so much. You said love is spontaneously felt. I love that because that's how I feel as well. Exactly that. It's such a beautiful way of putting it. I think what's dawned on me as I've, reached the ripe old age of 49 is that it doesn't have to be or need to be for everyone.
Yeah.
And for lots of women, they don't necessarily need that. And that's completely fine. But for some of us, we do. And I think it's really important to sort of understand and distinguish between those people in the world who absolutely need that spontaneously felt love. That's what we feel like we need. I do, you do. And those people that just don't feel that and actually are much more kind of looking at the checklist, but he's this and he, okay, well, I'll let go of the fact that I don't fancy him at all because he'd be a really great dad and he's really kind. He's got loads of money because that does happen. And it always blows my mind because I'm the opposite of that. And I've wished over the years that I was a bit like that because boy, it would have been easier in many ways if it was just like, yeah, okay, well, he's lovely. It's because I've had boyfriends who were lovely and kind and would have been great dads and loved me. And it would have been, absolutely, it would have probably have been a very nice life had that been enough for me. But it wasn't because I wasn't feeling that feeling that you're talking about. And obviously it's, it's much more nuanced than that. It's not like you're either that or you're that, but obviously there is nuance and it's a spectrum. But I do think it's interesting to think about the fact that and I know people, and I've also heard other people tell me about people that they know. We've messaged about it in our Thrive Solar WhatsApp group that we know people or people in the group know people who are exactly that, who have said, yeah, well, I don't want to shag him, but I'm with him because A, B, C, D, E. And let me just say, that's fine because that is what some people prioritize, but it's not what some other people prioritize. I just find it absolutely endlessly fascinating, actually, this topic. I really do.
Me too. I find it so fascinating. I just think I'd rather have a week of being with someone where I just think, I adore you so much. I love you so much. I admire you. I respect you. I want to be with you all the time, rather than 30 years of someone where you're like, you're just not quite it
Yeah.
right? I just don't quite feel it.
Yeah.
So but again, it's so personal, right? But I think it's about saying we're allowed to feel the way that we feel.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with us. There is nothing weird about
We
us.
are not too picky.
We're not too picky. We just want something different. That's okay. We all want different things in our life.
Yeah. It does beg the question, though, just speaking to what you just said. You said you'd rather be with, and I'm completely the same. I'd rather have a week of like amazing, like, oh my God, than 30 years of nah. And I just wonder, and I've definitely talked about this before on the podcast, I just wonder how many people are in exactly that position, but feel stuck in that because of that fear that so many people have of being alone, because of, the fact that apparently being single is a fate worse than death. So, well, I'm better off here, even though I'm not really very happy, but at least I've got someone. This is the thing that worries me about that kind of thinking around relationships.
Yes. I think this is why I feel so passionately as you do about helping people to see singlehood as actually a wonderful state of being. Because the flip side of this kind of fear of singlehood is people going, well, I have to stay in a relationship because just wouldn't be able to cope on my own. And the reality is you absolutely can. And like there's a wonderful life out there for you. And there's lots of statistics around this. I mean, there's data to show that people stay in relationships because they are too scared to leave, because they're too scared that their partner won't be able to cope without them,
Yeah.
right? So it's like this is having a big impact on us, on all
Mm.
of us. And I think we really owe it to ourselves, actually, to normalize singlehood, to celebrate singlehood, to make it this wonderful life experience so that when we get into a relationship, it's absolutely from this place of, yes, you make my life so much better,
Yeah.
as opposed to, I need to be with you.
Yeah.
And I was definitely, I speak as a woman who felt that way, from 18, 19, 20. I felt that way. I felt that I had to be with someone because I couldn't cope on my own.
Yeah.
And it is hard to like be an independent woman and pay the bills. And I renovated my house last year, which was the scariest thing I've ever done on my own. But it's amazing, and it really shows you what we are actually capable of when you put yourself in those situations. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of women and men would be really surprised at how they thrive and
Yeah.
fly and flourish when they put themselves in that situation, and they kind of look it in the face, and then they go, actually, you know what? I got some chutzpah here. I can do this. Like
I
it's
love that.
fab.
I love that so much because it's so true. And I resonate with what you said there so much because there is this feeling that you can get that is so incredibly empowering when you learn, which I believe you can learn to be happy single. Because, like anything in life, you get out what you put in, and you have to make a decision to lean into single life. Because if you're just determined to hate it and think that you don't want to be single and you want to unsingle yourself, then fine, you're always going to hate it. But you can also do the opposite of that. You can make the decision to truly embrace it. And I believe that there is this place that it's almost like it's this sort of hidden feeling that can come with being happily single, where you just, like you said, you use the words chutzpah. I love that so much. It's so true. It's this feeling like nothing else because it's coming from you. It's like that internal power and that internal joy. You are cultivating it within yourself, and that's what we're all looking for. That feeling is what we're all looking for in actual fact. But we think we're going to find it outside of ourselves. We think we're going to find it in the relationship or the baby. But when you start to connect with yourself and you start to find it within yourself, bloody hell, it feels awesome. Going back to your writing, have you ever written about this particular thing that we're talking about now, this kind of thriving in single life?
I actually haven't. I have a draft which is all about that, and I need to make sure that I put it out there. Maybe
Yeah.
episode would be great. So I absolutely will. I mean, I wrote about doing the renovation just because I wanted to talk about something that I feel like isn't spoken about very much, which is the joy of decorating your own home, not having to make compromises for somebody else. Like it completely just blew my mind to be able to make all of the design decisions, and I lived with my ex who was over a while back, and like, you do have to you have to get the sofa that he likes, or we're painting the color of the wall like this. Or even if he wasn't saying, this is what I want, I was tempering my vision to be like, oh, it has to fit us, right? As a couple, like he has to feel comfortable in the space. And now I just live in, honestly, it is the most feminine house you have ever seen. You would walk in the door, you would be like, there is a woman who loves pink lives here. It just brings me joy every single day. And it feels so wonderful to have something that I built for me, you know, that represents me. And then
Totally.
you say it's addictive. It is addictive
Yeah.
sometimes to be able to do these things.
And can I just point out as well, this is exactly the kind of underrated benefit that I was talking about. And these are the kinds of things that we play down as if they're nothing. Like being able to create your own space that brings you joy every day. We brush that off as well, well, that's not important, because when you're in a relationship, it's totally fine to compromise. Actually, like, no, it's not a small thing. Like you say, you wrote a freaking piece about it because it gives you so much joy and it was something that you wanted to talk about. I absolutely fucking love that, Nadia. I love it. So, what else did you say in the piece?
Yeah, I think I just said, how kind of liberating it was. And don't get me wrong, like, it's hard, right? Obviously, renovating a house is really difficult, but just the sense of accomplishment, the
Yeah,
sense of achievement that can come from doing something when you're on your own. Again, it's something we just don't talk about, right? And it's kind of, if you're single, no one's there being like, wow, it's so amazing that you pay the bills by yourself. That's amazing. It's so amazing that you deal with all of the kind of emotional crap at work, or whatever's going on, and you're processing that, and you're grown up enough to be able to handle that and deal with that in your own life. Like, these are pretty fabulous things. And yeah, I just think like we kind of need to give that celebration to ourselves, right, for being able to do these things. But
yeah,
I definitely, I think I say in the piece, and the way that I felt at the end was just a real sense of pride and a real feeling of like, I can do things, like I have power. And I talk a little bit as well, actually, about my mum and how my mum was just had no confidence. My mum is a wonderful person, incredibly intelligent, incredibly capable, right? Like, probably the most intelligent person that I know, but
doesn't
had
surprise me that your mum's really intelligent.
she's amazing, but like zero self-esteem, right? Like
Right.
if I ask her anything, she'll say, "Oh, I don't know, ask blah blah blah, or maybe you should look it up or whatever." She has no confidence in her own
Mm.
opinions. And I think you don't realize that you kind of take on a little bit of that. Like I think a lot of women do, right? Growing up in patriarchy, you sort of take on these beliefs that, oh, I don't know, I couldn't do that. And I think that house project was so important for me to just say at the end of that, you do know.
Yeah.
You do bloody know. You know what you want and you can do it. And I think now I really feel like a different woman having done that. It's like, yeah, it's a big part of my
Love it.
development, I think.
Absolutely love it. Nadia is just so fabulous to talk to you, and I just want to give you the chance to say anything that I perhaps have missed that you would like to say to the single women listening that I haven't asked you.
Um, yeah, I'd love to just kind of mention an article that might be of interest to some of the listeners that I wrote. It's called If I Was in a Hollywood Movie, I'd Be Dead. And it's basically about representation of single, childless slash child-free women in films. And it's essentially based on a fantastic piece of research done by a lecturer working at the University of Oslo called Christina Archetti. I hope I've pronounced that right, where she basically looks at about 50 different films and looks at how childless women are represented in those films. And what she found was that in almost every one, the woman either dies, usually by committing suicide, or sort of ends up in this kind of hopeless place. So she ends up like a drug addict or an alcoholic, or she's just basically so consumed by grief about the fact that she doesn't have children that she can't actually function. And it's essentially about that. And it's essentially about saying, like, really look at all of these things, these films that you've been consuming and stuff, because the way that you're feeling, it might not be coming from you. A lot of the time, it's coming from stuff that you've seen, and it's very subconscious. And so it's just kind of raising awareness of that. And I think when you realize that, you start to see these things everywhere. And that as well has been super empowering for me, and a really big part of my journey has been about actually recognizing pronatalism, right? The kind of like people pushing this idea of women having kids, because it makes you realize I'm not crazy,
Yeah.
right? This isn't actually coming from me. This
Yeah.
is coming from all these different sources. So have a little read of that if that's something that you're interested in, and you want to know a bit more about how you might have been affected by some of those messages.
I'm definitely going to read that article. And actually this, it sounds amazing and I'm sure it is. So I'll put it again, I'll put that in the show notes. It's kind of about awareness. Everything always comes back to awareness. That must be the word that's come out of my mouth most in the last 5 years, more than any other word, I think, apart from maybe single. But I think we go through most of our lives just without any awareness of pronatalism, without awareness of the messaging that has been shoved down our throats because it's just so inherent in our society. And as soon as we become aware of it, as soon as we wise up, you're like, oh my God, well, there it is there, and there it is there, and there it is there. And like you say, that just being aware of it and just noticing it can actually really help you process it and help it affect you less. So thank you for bringing that up. And now listen, it is honestly so fabulous to talk to you. But before we wrap up, I want to make sure that people know exactly how can they read your stuff. Do you have a Substack? Remind me. And can people sign up to that?
Yes, I do. I have a Substack which you can sign up to, and it's all for free, available free on there. It is at Nadia Huq. And then I also write on Medium, and I publish my pieces first on Medium, and then I'll publish on Substack later for free. So if you have a Medium account, you can read all my stuff as soon as it comes out, or you can just wait until it's out on Substack.
Nadia, thank you so much for your time. It has been joyous. I'm so glad to finally get you on. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it too. And I'll see you on a live call very, very soon, but sending you lots of love.
Loved it, Lucy. Thank you so much. I will see you soon.
You're so welcome.